So this is an excerpt from one of my favorite books of all time, Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. No matter which culture a woman is influenced, she understands the words wild and women intuitively. When women hear those words, an old memory is stirred and brought back to life. The memory is of our absolute, undeniable, irrevocable kinship with the wild feminine, a relationship which may have become ghosty from neglect, buried by over-domestication, outlawed by the surrounding culture, or no longer understood anymore. We may have forgotten her names. We may not answer when she calls ours, but in our bones, we know her. We yearn towards her. We know she belongs to us, and we to her.
Hi, I'm Corrin. This podcast is called The Ache, an ode to the existential ache of being human, that still small voice tugging inside every single one of us, prompting us to change, move, grow, become more of our authentic selves. This is conversations with people who dance with the ache.
Especially if we're talking about the ache, if we're talking about that blossoming, that blooming, like this feels like you can't have one without the other. And it was funny because I've highlighted pretty much the whole book at this point, but I was like, I'm just going to flip open and whatever kind of grabs my attention, I feel like that's the one. And of course, it's like the intro to the concept.
That is the voice of Jessica Gill. I first became aware of Jessica many years ago because the brand that she works for and hosts the podcast of, which is called To Be Magnetic, is a brand that I subscribed to and was a member of their program for many years. And it was a big part of my transformation as a person and honestly one of the things that got me into shadow work. So Jessica has been a big part of my life because I've listened to her host the podcast and heard her voice for many years. But this was my first time meeting her and speaking with her. And I loved our conversation, and I think you guys will love it too. And just in case anyone's interested in To Be Magnetic, at the end of this episode, we will be linking a discount code in the show notes. So any of my listeners that are interested in joining To Be Magnetic, that discount code will be there. And they have not sponsored me. This is not something that I'm being paid to say. I genuinely just love and believe in the work that they're doing. So that'll be there in case anyone's interested. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Jessica Gill.
Yeah, so the week you reached out about the podcast, I was in a deep conversation with ChatGPT where I was asking it questions about personal branding, and I've been getting a ping for a long time, like an intuitive pull to launch a YouTube or some other creative platform, and was trying to parse through clarity around it, and it kept bringing up this concept of the ache. And it kept saying, you know, to watch a woman ache in public. And I was like, the ache, I've never really heard it presented like that before. Like, what does that mean? And I kept trying to get clarity from it again and again and again. It was like to unfold, to bloom in public. And I was like, okay, give me more. And you literally reached out the next day and I was like, I'm saying yes immediately. Like, there's something I must be guided to here. Like, this is so meant to be.
You've got to be kidding me. That is too crazy because you're the first person that I'm recording for the podcast that isn't someone that I know personally.
Wow.
And I had also a ping, like an intuitive hit to reach out to you.
Wow.
And I was just like, I should ask her if she wants to do it. Because I was listening to the TBM podcast and I just like got that feeling that literally when I reached out to you was like when I like probably an hour before, like 2 hours before. And I was just like, oh, fuck it. I'll just ask her if she's interested. Because I had initially thought, oh, I'll just have people that I know really, really well. Mm-hmm. But then I was listening to the TBM pod and I was like, actually, I don't know you personally, obviously. However, the crossover of the TBM work and just being in the space of people like doing that type of deep work, I was like, I think Jessica might be someone that could, go there. Because there's a lot of people that, aren't ready to go there.
Wow.
So I know you listened to the podcast. Do you mind telling me which episode you listened to? Just so I have.
It was the first one. I believe her name's Lily.
Oh, Lily, my writing partner.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So her story, also like the clarity and ease through which she talked about her shadow parts, and I can't even fathom getting to play a character that is the embodiment of your shadow parts that you've always wanted to hide. I'm just like, I mean, the most healing work, but also what the actual F.
Scary. Yeah, for sure. Okay, that's a great jumping off point to know that that's the episode that you listened to, because I think hers is a really good one for people to hear, just because she's such a great model of being able to, explain like situations that have gone on in her life that lend themselves to that ache, that blossoming, just like ChatGPT was saying. Do you have a sense, did you have any specific topics that you wanted to talk about? I think the wild women is a great jumping off point if you want to start there.
Yeah.
In terms of like what it's meant to you or how it's changed your outlook. I mean, if you've highlighted almost the entire book, then I assume it is something that's dear to you.
I think collectively, and I'm curious if you're feeling similarly right now, but we're in such a shifting paradigm. It feels like we're between two worlds in some senses. Like a lot of systems and ways of doing things are crumbling. We're moving into this new era. We're not at all landed there yet. I think a lot of what even we see now is going to significantly shift. But there seems to be this ache, to use your word, like underpinning so much. And I'm so curious. I think there is this path with artists to blossom into a new version of what that looks like. I mean, if we look at the marketplace for artists right now, there is so much like shape-shifting, commodifying, bite-size, optimization. It's so hyper-masculine. And for my own self, I can learn that. I know that. I like systems. I'm a Capricorn. The go one step at a time. Like, I get that. And the more I run that way, the more I lose the wild woman. The more I lose the intuitive, the dance, the trust, the nature, the one with creation. And I feel like beneath the energy right now is that deep calling of like bringing that archetype back into the forefront. I mean, even on a nervous system level, right? Like this is another conversation with ChatGPT.
I love having chats with ChatGPT. I use Claude a lot too.
I will give the disclaimer, because a lot of people are like, it uses so much energy. Like, how do you justify it? And we don't know what's happening with the privacy of it. So I don't want everyone to like run out and become obsessed with all the things. So my kind of stance on it is like, when you feel called to use it intentionally and knowing that we don't know what's going to happen with it. I say all this as I did have this combo with ChatGPT, but it was saying how, right now we're at this place where people are trying to create and share art on social media, online, to get their programs, their podcasts, their passions seen in the world. And in doing so, like, you even think about clips. People have clips from podcasts and such. You are cutting out the breath. You're cutting out the pause. You're cutting out all of these segments. And in doing so, you're flattening the soul. You're flattening, what did that pause give that conversation that we might not know, even if our attention span can't handle that pause. But it's like we are regulating with this energy instead of keeping the pause in there and then waiting and thinking about, wow, how can I digest that? What do I think about what they said? Okay. And then our nervous system regulates with that. So I feel like there's this interesting wave of we are now programmed in a way for bite-sized information everywhere. And yet we're longing for that comfort, that soothing, that length. But we almost like can't metabolize it yet. Like it's not ready to land. Like even as a user, I'm like, oh, I'm bored of that. I have to scroll on.
It's so funny. I'm such a long form girly,
Ugh,
you know, like
love it. We need it.
Yeah. I've been doing this thing called the Great Courses, and it's college lectures, and it'll be like 20-part lectures, and each of them are like 45 minutes. And so like, that's the type shit I'm on, you know, I'm like, my mind does go for like the longer form, but I hear what you're saying. And I do think that is what is going on in culture in a big way, is that like, you know, because of social media, because of like everything feels like it's speeding up, it does think, or I do think it's enhancing exactly what you're saying, that other end of the stick, which is the longer form, the nuance, longer, deeper conversations. I think it's a big reason why I was drawn to wanting to make this podcast in the first place, which was like a total like thing that wouldn't leave me alone. It just came to me and kept asking. And I was like, now why would I make a podcast? I'm already busy making films and busy like doing all this other stuff. It's just, it is interesting, the intersection of those two things. Cause I think I'm curious to see if it does stoke more of that craving for a deeper thing. But how is it manifested for you in your own body? Like that those two poles, were you someone that had to rewild, quote unquote, yourself, or were you someone that always was in touch with that space? Or I guess my question is broader, more of just like, what was your longer arc relationship with the wild woman inside of you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, gosh, it had to have been maybe middle school or high school where I started to lose touch with that, where like childhood, growing up, running outside barefoot, adventure games, like literally every bug, tree, leaf was a character in my play, you know, like it was just like the most fun dream world to play in. I would reenact Titanic, which why would I do that? But that was, you know, what was happening. And it must have been probably around middle school, high school, where there was like an understanding of, oh, if I am going to survive in this like social climate, like I have to disconnect from these parts of me, and I have to become what I'm witnessing these other people who are, you know, quote unquote, in charge or leaders of the pack or whatever it may be. And I don't think I really fully let that wild nature back in until maybe 24, 25. So it was like that chapter where you're integrating socially, you're learning different friend dynamics. But I would say there was a big part of me that was just like yearning for the inner artist, yearning for that self-expression, for that curiosity, but then always this archetype of, no, but like, how do you fit into this friend group? And like, what events are you going to with them, and what are you doing with them?
That's so interesting. And I have to circle back to you saying, why would I act out Titanic? Because as you were talking, I was thinking when you said that and you were like, why would I act that out? And I was like, wait, because you're Rose. Because think about the story of the Titanic. I'm like, she wants to go under the ship.
Yes.
She wants to like dance and like let go and like be like break free from those societal constraints of how she quote unquote fits in, right? And so as you continued on your story, I was like, I feel like the Titanic thing is actually so poignant, because then you stepped more into like Rose in the upstairs deck, you know, during that period where you lost more touch with the downstairs deck Rose, you know?
Yeah. Wow. I have never thought of it like that. That is so interesting and makes so much sense. But there is at certain chapters in my life too, where it's like, oh man, like that feeling of like I'm screaming in the middle of a room and nobody looks up, but who are you screaming to? I'm screaming to myself. You know what I mean? I'm screaming to the parts of me that I've ignored or repressed or put down. And it's funny, integrating those parts is way less dramatic than I think we're afraid of happening. Like we almost think, wow, I'm going to become a different person tomorrow. And it's like, no, you just need to sit down and paint, or you just need to like look at the stars, or you just needed to record that voice note to your friend and like daydream a bit. It's less identity overhaul than we might think. And similar to your friend's episode when she was saying how, you know, when she leaned into that character that she'd pushed down for so long, that part of herself, it came back like such a strong memory. I think when we can allow like little spaces for it, it does come back palpable. I mean, one thing, the audience might not know this, but I'm the host of the Expanded podcast and Chief Content Officer for To Be Magnetic, a neural manifestation company. And one of the things that we talk about over there a lot is the authentic code, like these 4 pillars of your authenticity at this season of life. And so many times people put on aspects of their authentic code that they like want to integrate more of, they want to step into more of, and they think it's like this far out thing that they can't connect with, or they have to have this grand manifestation before they can arrive there in their life. And it's like, it's in those tiny little moments where we integrate with it, where we are reminded of it. And I think rewilding and stepping back to our wild essence is just that simple too, if we can quiet all the ego voices down.
Yeah, because it's easy to start attaching meaning to things. It's something I talk about a lot with my friends and my partner is, you know, I think a big thing that can hold people back from certain integrations, and I'll just speak from my own experience, like with this podcast, for example, I wanted to do it. It was a pure desire to want to do it. However, when I started thinking about, you know, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to put the podcast out, I started, you know, it's all those voices that come up that you attach meaning to and are like, well, if I do that, it means this about me. For me, I was like, oh, that's going to mean people are going to be looking at me thinking, oh, she thinks she's a podcaster now or has something that we should be listening to, or like, it's going to mean that I'm like looking for a certain type of attention, or like I'm doing that thing again where I like start another project that maybe I regret starting. None of those things ended up being true once I started. Well, certainly people maybe think whatever they think, but I can't control that. But once I did take those actions, like it was a lot, like you said, a lot less dramatic than I thought it was going to be. And I've been having a great time. And it's actually changed subtly the way that I'm relating to myself. So I'm not censoring quite as much, because I've started practicing putting more authenticity out there into the world. And it seems to be helping others do the same. I've had some guests come on and then leave and be like, oh my God, I have a vulnerability hangover. I'm like nervous, but like I need to do this and I need to have said those things and have it go out. And so I think, yeah, it's been a beautiful experience. But have you had anything that stuck out for you in that process, like of integration? It can be around the rewilding or it can be around something else, but any like specific examples that you feel comfortable sharing?
I mean, I'll bring up one that I've gone through recently too. So I kind of mentioned at the top, I've been getting this like rewilding call for a different sort of artistic project, maybe bringing something to YouTube or another form of self-expression in some way. And I was journaling kind of on the shadow parts of like, okay, well, there's definitely a part of me, and if anyone's familiar with internal family systems therapy model, I love it. It's basically this concept where you have all these different archetypes within you, and that it's not you are this one identity, but they're all there, they're all valid, they're all created for a reason. And when you can communicate with them and actually understand their process, they can stop taking the driver's seat of your life, like the inner child coming in and being like, no, I don't want to do the podcast because, whatever fears are coming up for you. It's like, okay, can we talk to that part, ease it a little bit, and then be able to step through it? And so I was like, okay, first I'm going to let my ego just say, without any filter, like, what is their fullest desire for this little portal, right? Because I think so many times we're afraid, like, well, I don't want to do it out of ego, and I don't want to be someone who's attention seeking, and I don't want to do it, whatever those things are. And it was like, I want to grow this because I want to communicate with an audience and share vulnerably and share like unfiltered for myself, not attached to another brand, but like just as me. And then I was like, okay, like go deeper. Like, what are your fears? And it was like, well, I want to build like a very loyal audience. And this idea of loyal kept coming up. And I was like, what is that? Like, what does that mean? And I was like, well, if I have people that really like me, then they can, kind of help protect me against people that don't. Because I feel like the more seen you are, you're going to have people that don't like you. And the more authentic you are, the more you're going to have people that don't like you. Just because either they're triggered by you because they want to express in that way, or maybe you're just not their cup of tea, who knows? And this sort of awareness of like, what does it mean to be in the public eye or have things out there? There's like a meta moment. I don't know if you ever get this, especially like being in films and now podcasting too, but I'm like, oh my God, how much stuff do I have on the internet now? Like,
oh, all the time. All the time.
Like, oh my God. I'm like, wait a second. I don't know if I want it all out there forever. But then you're just like, okay, I can't think about it too much. I'm going to go crazy. But so I started journaling with this part, and I was like, okay, like, so why do you need them to protect you? And I was like, well, because if more people liked me than disliked me, then that would be a sign that I was meant to launch this project. And I was like, there we go. I'm still looking for permission that I am a good enough vessel, creator, artist, voice, anything to be able to even do the thing that I feel interested in doing. And so that was such an unlock for me, because it was like, okay, so it's not really about the loyal fan base, the this, the that. There's some protection and maybe a little bit of like fear of, the high school bullies coming back around or something like that. But really, it was this wanting permission that my desires were okay and I was uniquely suited to create them. And I think that is such an interesting thing of how often, even the people that feel the most compelled, the most drawn, the most passionate about the project, there's still that like microscopic voice that's like, yeah, but is this really your thing? Or like, do you really think that you're the one to do this? Like, there's that need for someone to come down and be like, no, you were meant to make the Egg podcast. You know what I mean? Like, it's still like waiting for that last bit of permission. And in this little journaling exercise, I was like, okay, so what would I need to actually feel full permission? I was like, I think the only way I would truly feel like, okay, this is my thing, is if God or universe came down himself and were like, I've gifted you with this. Here it is. Do this task. And I was like, cool. So that's not going to happen. So what are your options here? And then it was like, oh, I can either create this with the belief that just because I want to do it means that it's worthy venture of doing, period, the end. Or I can create it and then constantly be looking for validation that this was the right thing for me to do. One is going to keep me not authentic, keep my voice small, filtering, changing whatever I'm posting versus being a clear channel. And one is just self-expression, and it could literally go nowhere. And just the fact that I did it means I got it out and I trusted that path. So I'm going to try to trust that path.
That's so exciting. I'm so happy that have you taken any steps toward it yet, or just that initial step of being like, okay, I'm going to do it?
I've recorded a couple of like pieces and I'm figuring out how I want to like organize it and put it together. But after that, I did the first like sit down recording. I was like, okay, we have something.
That is awesome. I recently this morning, actually, I don't know if we were talking about it this morning. It doesn't matter. My old writing partner that I used to work with before I worked with Lily, her name's Maddie. It's funny because you and her remind me of each other. I've told her like over the years that your voice and your cadence, it's not the tone of your voice, it's more the cadence.
Yeah.
But reminds me of her. When you first started hosting the podcast, I immediately was thinking of Maddie. Like, I was, there's something about you that reminds me. But she's going through this similar thing with expressing herself. And she's been talking about wanting to express herself more openly and publicly. And she's been doing that. And we were just talking about it this morning. So I'm like, oh, I love this.
Go, Maddie.
Go, Maddie. The concept of permission is such a big thing that I think about a lot too. There's another episode with Nika Burnett on my podcast where I asked her, like, do you ever feel like you need to ask for permission? And she was like, no, I don't know who you would ask. I've never had that thought.
Wow.
And I'm fascinated and have met many people like that in my life. And I'm always like, what's it like? Yeah. Like, what's it like? Because I, like you, and I'm sure that, you know, you and I have very different upbringings, different things that we've experienced, but I had a similar thing that happened to me after I moved to LA. I, as a child, like, created all the time. I wrote plays, made movies. My sisters and I were in an a cappella group. We performed professionally. I moved to Los Angeles and I was like, yeah, I'm going to work in film. I'm going to do this and that. And I do. Now I work full-time in film. However, over the years, as I've lived here now for 14 years, and over the years, I just, like, you know, things get into your head after being around other people that are successful in the industry, other people that are not successful, hearing what they say. And over time, there was like an internal shrinking that started happening. And it wasn't from when I was a kid, which is, I think, when most people pick up their internal shrinking. It was more like me entering the world as an adult and being like, oh, people are not reacting well to me being someone that, like, is passionate and produces a lot of stuff, you know? And it was like, oh, now there's a target on my back, like you said, with your, you know, that part of you that was like, we need to be protected. I think I had a similar part in myself as well, of just being like, oh God, like, that part of me that is so joyful and connected and wanting to produce work and put it out there, that makes me a target, is like very much like the feeling that I, you know, had. I've been getting myofascial release. Have you ever experienced it before?
I don't think I've done that. I've done what is it, like lymphatic drainage massage? Okay. Not quite the same, but
love that.
Body work.
Love that too. Yes. My therapist, actually, my myofascial release body worker, I don't know what to call her, the person, my practitioner, she has an episode coming out as well. But just to piggyback off of your internal family systems and all the parts, things come up during myofascial release, because the whole concept is like, you know, your fascia holds so much tension and pull, and it can like pull against your muscles or your bones and even like move things around. And since I've been getting it, I've actually gone to the chiropractor way less, when I was going like a month, at least once a month prior to that. So it's crazy how it works. But what will come up a lot is emotions that are like held in the body. And so it's a lot of shadow work. It's a lot of inner child work. It's a lot of facing certain things, because as she works with the fascia, things that, you know, if you've read The Body Keeps a Score, I think maybe you guys have mentioned it on the podcast. Okay, so you know, the fascia is often like where the body is holding those emotions and stored memories and different things. So I recently had this thing come up with my practitioner where we've been working on this like part of my like groin area, almost like where my leg meets my pelvis. And usually it would be like more like tense emotions coming up, or anger, or like different memories of like, you know, bad situations in my past. But the last time I was there, she went to the same spot and she was like, I think there's still some more stuff here. And she starts working on it, and all this joy came up. I just started like laughing and like so joyful. And I was like, oh my God. Like this joy has been trapped in my body, and I just, everything connected. And I have this like ongoing issue with my arm, and I just had this vision of like it's on my right side, on my right groin, and my right arm just like pushing it down almost. Like I had this vision of like, oh, this whole side of my body like trying to hold it down. And I connected it all together with like a situation from my past where like me being very joyful and like almost like Pollyanna, like really like naive in a way of like, oh, I'm just like positive and happy and out there, ended up getting me like, you know, into trouble and like targeted in a way that I internalized as like, oh, I can't show that side of myself. So to take it, I'm like thinking all the way back to like your first thing that you were saying of my roundabout way of getting back there, to your wild inner child and this part of us that, like you said, you came into school and it learns to be different to fit in or to get whatever needs met that you needed to be met. And it seems like now you have this moment where it can potentially shine.
Yes. And well, that joy is so, sorry, go ahead. Do you want to cut you
I
off?
was just going to say, no, please cut me off. I don't know exactly where I'm going, but the thing that I was going to circle it back to as well was that I meant to comment on was when you were like, oh, even if it goes nowhere, I was thinking it's going somewhere because you're reconnecting with that part of yourself, which is huge.
I think that joy is another thing that we also, or at least I, look so many times for permission, and I've had to work so hard over the years to like allow joy to be there in the midst of heaviness, in the midst of grief, in the midst of traumas, in the midst of a busy work day. Like there's so much of there's the collective, but then there's also the individual stuff of, well, I can experience joy when I do X, Y, Z, or when I finish my workday, when I, have thought about the causes that matter to me, when I help people, when I do once everyone else is like, I know that they're kind of good, then finally I can like surrender into that joy. I can like slip into that energy. And I think that is also something that's being like rewilded. It's just coming back up of like, oh, like joy is our birthright. Like joy can be in that moment when like the sun hits your face and you're just sitting there for an extra 5 seconds. Like it doesn't have to mean that you are bypassing or circumventing. In fact, in order to experience the most true joy, you have to be able to hold the depths. You have to know like how low you can go, or what that other end looks like, or what the alternative to that joy is, because otherwise it is surface joy. But like real true joy, I think, does come from the deepest places too.
I love that, and I agree wholeheartedly. And I think, all we have at the end of the day is this one day, and we don't really know what's coming after it, or if we're even going to get to the end of it. My boyfriend has this book that he reads all the time called Notes from Myself, and I love this book, but there's one quote from it that is my boyfriend's Instagram bio, which is, how you spend your days is how you spend your life. And that always sticks with me. And when you were like, oh, that extra 5 seconds of the sun on your face, I'm like, yeah, that's the ache, man. That's the like the thing that we live for, is to have these visceral physical experiences in this body that we can only have, they're singular. We can only have them once.
And we kind of choose whether we're going to be present for them or not. Like we can set up all the outside circumstances to be at the best potential. I think of like someone, working so hard and then finally taking that vacation, and they take that vacation and they set up the itinerary so it's so perfectly constructed so they have the optimal amount of experience and it's going to be the most fun and all the things. But in that moment when they show up, are they present? are they witnessing? Are they embodied in that experience? Because the setup, the circumstances are all great, but if you don't have that experience of truly being in your body and witnessing the surroundings, like that's where that stuff takes place. And it's not even something we can quantify or plan for or any of it. We have to just be surrendered to it. We have to like shut down all the other parts of our brain that wants to optimize and be like, let's lean into this. And if I really look back on every experience that has been like the greatest of my life, they all stem from that. It kicks off there, and then that spawns an idea that leads to XYZ amazing things that happen in my life. But almost never have the greatest things in my life transpired from like, I'm going to sit down and make a chart of all the things that I'm going to craft in.
Yeah. Because we don't know. We never know what's going to happen. But there is that like desire, I think, in certain types of people. And I would say most people, but I don't know. I can only speak really, truly for myself and like people I know intimately. But there can be such a desire to like try to manufacture as many opportunities for things to be going how you want them to go, and control. But yeah. At the end of the day, like we're gonna see.
Yeah.
We're gonna see when we get there.
Yeah.
I also have a Capricorn moon, so I'm not a Capricorn, but I have a Capricorn moon, which is that placement is, you know, I know the feeling of being like it's not okay for me to celebrate my wins or like be joyful unless all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and it's something that I still struggle with. In my life for sure.
Same.
But yeah. I think it's gotten a lot better lately. I know, I think a little bit of your story just from having listened to the podcast and like knowing, you know, what you've shared on there. But I was wondering if you would be willing to talk a little bit about your story with your career, because you're in a field that's unique. A big thing that I do on this podcast too is I bring people on who have jobs or work in certain fields that are not necessarily quote unquote mainstream. Although what does that mean now? Because now mainstream is so niche. Like there's so many niches, and that is the mainstream. We don't really have the same like mainstream that it was like in the early 2000s or prior. However, I think there's still, you know, the working in neural manifestation, working with the brand that you work with now. I'm wondering about your relationship with that, your relationship with being involved with something that's more on the fringes, something that's a little bit more like, ooh, what is that? Like, you do what? Like, wondering if you were always comfortable with that, or if you had to step into that, or like any transitions that you had being willing to just sort of step into, I work for a manifestation company.
Well, if I think about my younger self, my wild woman younger self, she just really wanted to be a witch. Like I would watch Charmed, I would watch Hocus Pocus, not the bad witches, but I liked the idea of like a magical essence, like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, like whatever I could get my hands on. I thought it was the coolest thing ever to alchemize something, to transform something. And, you know, at a certain age, I had to really contend with the fact that, like, I wasn't going to turn 16 and my mom was going to tell me I could fly. Like, it just wasn't going to happen. So I feel like in some ways I was already primed and ready to go into, you know, an industry like that. But I actually went to film school. I went to Penn State for film and television production and started off working in TV and producing. I was casting director in-house for the production company in a lot of unscripted and reality type shows, which was, I think my goal and my passion at the time was telling stories that I thought were really transformational. I guess in a way of bringing that alchemy to life, because I know when I watched in-depth movies, I have very vivid memories of like getting HBO access finally in like my high school years and getting to watch the movies on there. And I was just like, what? Like, this is such a cool world. This is amazing. I'm obsessed. So I went to film school with the hopes of like, I want to tell those stories. I want to give people that feeling I had when I watched a movie. And I was like, the way I think about life is like forever changed. You know, like it has made an impression on me in a certain way. And wound up working in television and all of those things. And a lot of the stories and projects that I was getting on, I was kind of falling deeper and deeper away from that essence, which was telling those stories that were transformational. I was like kind of trying to make it fit. I was like, well, like this woman has a deep story and we're going to have her on. And like, as the casting director, I'd be like, okay, let's, you know, plug her in here. Or some of the projects, I got to like direct on or produce on, I was like, okay, like let's get to the heart of it. Like I kept going for the story, and it was so much about like the sale or the sensationalism or things like that. So it felt like it was just pulling me further down this path. And at one point I was working in New York. I left the company, took a leap of faith, moved to LA. I was like, maybe I can connect with the stories I'm meant to in LA. I can network with more people, be around more, you know, artists that are specifically in my field. And I still kept getting booked on like similar type projects. And I took a year to develop my own script where I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna like write my own piece. Mind you, I wasn't really writing scripts. I'm not a writer. That wasn't like my forte. So I was like, I'm just going to figure out, I'm going to teach myself how to do this. I'm going to learn how to do this. And after about a year of going through that and pitching that script and the whole process, it was so transformational. But I was like, I feel like I have to pivot. Like, I feel like this is the time to move paths, because I'm hitting a wall in this creative field. And simultaneously, I would say, as soon as I moved out to LA, not to be stereotypical, but I started getting into the spiritual work of it all. And that was fascinating, because at the heart of every story and every character that you're telling is their psychological makeup. Like, what makes them tick? Why do they do this? What drives them? What motivates them? Why do they see the world through this lens? And why is this character, like Walter White, for example, someone from Breaking Bad, like, why do we still cheer for him, but yet he's doing all these horrible things? Like, what is happening in this like beautiful dance? And I started seeing that those kind of in-depth stories show up in the wellness world and the spiritual world, in these like deep core excavation stories. And I was like, that's interesting. And podcasting started coming about at that time. And I got a ping similar to you of like, launch your own podcast, talk to your friends, just test out the medium, like try the stories on that route. And it did pretty well. But more than anything, it gave me like an incredible skill set of how to produce and run my whole podcast, top to bottom. And then I started doing it for friends. And one of my favorite, you know, spiritual wellness brands at the time, To Be Magnetic, was hiring for a podcast producer. And it was interesting because simultaneously, finally, a friend of mine had introduced me to someone who was looking for spec scripts for the Practical Magic prequel TV show on HBO. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to submit a script for that. And so at the same time, I had this like one portal kind of open in this podcasting wellness space. And then this other portal, like finally my dream come true. If I can just land this script, it would be, you know, incredible. And when I'm taking time and like really writing down and world building and crafting out this script. And I was like, okay, universe, like whichever route I'm supposed to go, like I trust you. Like send me off where I'm supposed to go, what is supposed to like develop me for the next chapter in my life, because I'm really kind of surrendered to either path, especially now that it felt like there was a little bit of movement towards more of a direction I wanted to go in. And immediately heard back from TBM and was like pretty much hired on the spot. And I was like, okay, that's the route, that's where we're going. And it's been really beautiful growing with that brand, in that brand, now creating content for them, creating their workshops for them, their deep imaginings, their meditations, like seeing how so much of that curiosity piece, the part of me that loves the research, that likes to understand the why, I can now use as the channel back through this lens and then interview people for their transformations. And it is funny because now I've been with the company for almost 6 years, 5 years, 6 years, this September. And I've had a few people reach out recently this year of like, hey, could you review my script? Like, I'm looking for support on this, or like, oh, I need someone to like help with this project. And so it's interesting seeing how that world is also kind of coming back into
your life.
Yeah. Like even you're like, okay, like, yeah, I'm in film. And I'm like, so weird how these
here
people
you are on a filmmaker's podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, primarily most of my guests have been in film just because that's the world that I'm in, you know? So it's all coming together, the ache. Yeah. I can't believe that you said that. Oh my God, with the chat GPT.
It's really wild. It's really wild.
But yeah, I think that is so interesting. Like the trust that you were able to have in that moment of, were you freaking out, or were you feeling like
yeah, I was absolutely freaking out. I was also like specifically not taking on any jobs that were in the old vein of the television projects I didn't like. I like had a hard stop. I was like, no more. I'm not going to take these just to float me. I saved up money. I saved up my we call our FU fund. I was like, I'm going to float this, and I'm telling the universe I'm not fucking around. I'm not taking these jobs that I don't feel soul fulfillment with. I'm either going to do the ones that I do feel soul fulfilled, or I'm pivoting career paths. And it got down to, you know, the wire on the last few ones, and really I was like, oh universe, please, like, come on. But
oh my God, I can imagine like taking those leaps. I did it oh my God, not last year. Well, I've taken a lot of leaps in the last few years, but when I was writing the film that we're going to be making this summer, that will be my directorial debut, my first feature. But I took a huge leap with that. I got rid of my place and I moved in with my writing partner, Lily, who you heard her episode. And I just left LA for like multiple months. I had just met the person who's now my partner. And I was like, met him like 2 weeks before I left. That was also like a crazy leap, because then I was like, why don't you just come visit me for like a few weeks? He was like, okay. But I really do think, you know, I don't know how familiar people listening to this will be with TBM. Like my guess is probably not familiar. Yeah. But maybe some of them are. But that's a big part of the process that they teach at TBM, which Jessica works at, and which is that like passing tests or like saying no to the things that don't fit for you. That's always the hardest part for me personally. That's like the one part of the process that's the hardest. Action is really easy. Taking aligned action is easy. Ping's pretty easy. Like shadow work, doing the integrating, easy. It's the passing tests part that is the one that is always like stuck for me.
It's the growth edge. It's where it's almost like so many times we want to say like, okay, show me that there is some positive momentum in this path, and then I got you. And it's almost like reversed, where it's like, no, you have to show us that you're ready to not settle for these old things again. And when you do that, the momentum that shifts it is like exponential. That's where I think, sure, you can manifest if you like slowly move through the process, but those big quantum leaps, those moments that literally change the complete direction of your life, the complete pathway that is guiding you on your life, they don't come from a little tiny action. They don't come from a small fear. They come from those character building dark night of the soul. Like, okay, are you going to get through this and transform into a new person, or are you going to go back to your comfort zone?
Yeah. And it seems to have worked for you here. Like you stepped into that new role. Okay. 6 years later, now you're getting back into your creative side, and not that working at TBM is not creative, because I'm sure it's extremely creative. All you're doing is creative work. But it's interesting too to hear, like, as a child you were interested in magic, and then now this is what you do, which is basically like grown-up magic in a certain way. You know?
Science-backed magic.
Yeah, science-backed magic. I mean, I am of the belief system that it's all one and the same, but that we just don't have ways of quantifying it yet. Because if you had, my favorite thing to draw the similarity between is like germs. Like if you had told people in medieval times what germs were, they would have been like, witch, like burn her. Whereas now it's like, what are all of the things that are like that now that we just can't measure yet, and that we don't know that we don't have science-backed, you know, words and phrases and like ability to understand and like understanding exactly how they work. I'm sure there's plenty of concepts that right now feel really woo-woo to us that one day it'll just be a word. It'll be like how we call someone a psychic. We'll have like some scientific word for it in the future.
Yeah, 100%. It's the language of the unseen, and that's always going to be until you have like a scientific research study that the field is like, okay, A+, we've nailed this. We've looked under microscopes and we see the atoms moving, you know. But it's a leap of faith. But I think also it's that trust muscle with yourself that like the more you lean into it, the more you see evidence of its truth. And if that is all leaning in a direction of your highest good or your best path or most internal alignment, then keep going, keep trucking.
I love it. I love it. Do you have anything else burning to share, or any thoughts that came up that you thought you might want to get into?
I feel like this will not be a hard one for your audience, but just echoing the importance of that deep inner work. I think there can be a lot of theorizing, contemplating, debating, thinking about, intellectualizing. Yes, I understand that is my block or my trauma. But actually, like you're talking about the somatic work, the release work, the feeling part of it is honestly has been the fast track to so many of my manifestations and things coming through. You know, we have deep imaginings that help you guide through it, but anything that will help you release and connect with that emotional core and not just be like, okay, I get how it connects, but like sit there and feel it. It's almost like in that release, it opens up space for the next. So I guess my note would just be, don't avoid it, because it really is such an important part to your evolution.
I love it. I love that.
Thank you for listening to The Ache. This podcast is produced by myself, Corrin Evans, and Alexis Murphy. All the music you hear is original compositions by my friend Peter Colombo. All other pertinent information will be linked in the show notes, and thank you for listening.